Welcome to Takeaways, Life Lessons Learned. My guest today is Mark Fine, Mark L. Fine. What does L stand for?
L stands for Lawrence.
Lawrence.
That's my middle name. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but I'm figuring that with the initials of MF, I needed an L.
That makes sense. So Mark L. Fine has been an active real estate developer in Las Vegas for more than 40 years, but you're not just any kind of developer. You're a master planning developer.
That's 50 years, 51 years. I've been in Las Vegas for 51 years.
Wow. All right. So you spent the majority of your career as a master planner. We'll get into some of the details. You played a central role in developing this little community that we know here as Green Valley. And at the time, I understand it was Las Vegas's first large-scale master plan community.
Correct.
So from there, you went on to play an instrumental part in establishing Summerlin.
I did.
If that's not impressive enough.
Hey, how many of you guys get the second chance to do a do-over? Right?
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. So you also played a critical role in developing Queens Ridge North and South, and you were a senior advisor and partner with Focus Properties, where you did a lot. You assembled a consortium of builders. You worked closely with the BLM to acquire property. You managed all the pre-development work for other communities like Mountain's Edge, Providence, and Inspirata.
Right. And, when I started in Green Valley, the Vegas was a different town, and it kept becoming different town. You go from the Green Valleys to the Summerlins, and then all of a sudden, you have all these public builders that want to be here. Well, we didn't have public builders when I started, Green Valley. It was just in the early stages of the development of Green Valley of Las Vegas. And Green Valley wasn't even in Las Vegas. It was in Henderson, and we were far away. But when we get back to the Focus situation, because it's kind of fascinating, the Picolis was great because I had a chance to really help them build a very high-end quality community. They really wanted to leave a legacy. Wanda was running the family, hence the name Queens Ridge. And they wanted to do everything first class. And I think they didn't have the development experience. They had been involved in the development of the Picoli Ranch. But to go really high end, especially when Summerlin was being done at the same time, because at that time I had already left Summerlin, and then to take on Summerlin head on and be successful, was a tribute to them, because they wanted to do something first class. And lucky for me that I had someone I was working with that, that appreciated what I brought to the table and my experience and the builders that I could bring with me, because we had some good builders in there, and really create some value. It's all about about creating value for your family, for whatever business you're running. Is like, you got to find a way to make things better than you found them.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then the Focus era was fascinating, and we can get into that later.
Okay.
Only because it was these BLM auctions were taking place, and there were and the builders had an unsatiable appetite to have product. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I never experienced it before. I mean, I'm sucking up to the builders, if I can say that, to come and build in Green Valley and pick product and carefully plan things. And then all of a sudden, the market got so unbelievable in the early 2000s that the builders, they didn't care they went through a period of time where they'd only buy finished lots. And then they got to the point with the BLM auction started, they were buying undeveloped property, unimproved and unentitled property, and paying cash for it within 6 months. And we put these consortiums together to go bid on the properties between 3 or 4 or 5 builders, where we'd manage the consortium, because it was so overwhelming, the power of what was going on here, that it was very hard for private development to compete. And we were a cog for these builders, because we were able to kind of put them all together, and then they all picked which pieces they wanted, and they all picked different product they were going to build. And it was kind of Green Valley going backwards, so to speak, and trying to find a maker. It was a fascinating period. The money that was being thrown around, and consequently, in 2008, the market crashed, and apparently that formula didn't work either. But it was a to be a part of it, and be part of the master planning of it, and bringing in the builders and have the builders literally at the auction saying, bid higher, bid higher, bid, because we were, we were putting up, we didn't have the money. It was $200 million price on the day of the auction. You had to put up 20% of the down payment, the non-refundable, on the day of the auction. And then you had to put the rest of it up in 6 months. And it wasn't set. It was, you took all the risks of development, available utilities, and entitlements. And, but the builders just had this appetite, and they were taking the risk, and we were really the managers. But without us, the builders couldn't do it individually, because it was just, they needed the critical mass of putting 3 or 4 or 5 builders together in order to make it work. So anyway, it was an incredible era. But every part of my life here has been incredible.
What's incredible is as I was putting this together, and you see Green Valley, you see Summerlin, Queens Ridge, Mountain's Edge, Providence, Inspirata. It's likely that anyone listening to this right now is living in a community that you have your fingerprints on.
It's, I think about it. I think about the fact that you make an impact if you go back to, and maybe I can take the lead on this a little bit, because it's a really good to look back and say, look at the people that live in these communities. I mean, Green Valley's probably got over 100,000 people. Someone's probably got over 120, 30,000 people, and it's going to get bigger. People that live in these communities, I mean, your name's on the CC&Rs, your name's on the purchase contract, when people, I saw, if you live in Eagle Hills, because we did, custom amenity communities, custom homes. I did a lot of custom home communities. Part of the whole community development was creating a whole line of product, from entry-level housing to custom homes. And because we always had this undeveloped inventory of land, what we created in each phase dictated the value of the inventory of the land we still held. So it was very important that everything that we did created value for the rest of the property. Mm-hmm. We may not have maximized how many homes we could sell, but we never wanted to overload any categories in terms of entry-level housing, move-up housing, first, second time move-up housing, luxury housing, whatever. There was just all these market segments. And what we would try and do is find a good balance in all these market segments in order to and we did it in villages, and we divided the villages up into what I would see 5 to 7 year lifespans, because frankly, you're selling land to builders, and they're going to be in and out of the product in 5 to 7 years. And that could involve 1,500 homes. And then you start to develop your next village, and you start lining your builders up for your next village, because then you can start seeing where the demand was in the first village and how things are going and how things have changed.
How big's the village?
I would say the village, the village was dictated by how many homes you could sell in a 5 to 7 year period of time.
So whatever natural absorption was, you calculate 5 to 7 years.
Let's say there was, when I started Green Valley, in the whole Las Vegas market, the annual absorption was maybe 2,000 homes. I was in Henderson, which wasn't even in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. People wouldn't even drive to Henderson to look at a model if it had a Henderson address in those days. I mean, people are so proud to be in Henderson. But if you just take a standard situation today and say, look, there's 20,000 homes building on the market, and we can get 10% of the market. That's 2,000 homes a year. Am I going to get 2,000? If I wanted to get 2,000 homes a year, but a lot of that's heavy weighted toward entry level. Well, entry level is good, and you got to have a well-rounded product, but you don't want to be overloaded in the low income categories, because you want people moving to the product because they can see there's ability to move up. Mm-hmm. I mean, look what's going on at the summit today. It's like ridiculous. It was a $35 million home sale. I mean, people want to live near where the money is, because they always imagine that maybe someday they aspire mm-hmm. to be able to move up. So you got to balance the product in your community to always building value and always being creative. And by doing it in increments of 5 to 7 years or 7 to 10 years or whatever, it allowed you the flexibility of changing your product mix around as you can see the market changing. You always want to have good supply and demand balance. You never want to have too much supply and not enough mm-hmm. demand, because you don't look successful. And if you know what I'm saying. So,
I do, yeah.
So managing, if we've got a demand for, in the way I described the market segmentation of 1,000 homes a year, you want to make sure you're never developing more product than the market can bear. And there's nothing like, success breeds success. And, but that doesn't get us to obviously the beginning of Green Valley, but those are just generic comments about how to approach
a little sneak peek
how to approach large scale development. Because really, I was blessed to start with 7,000, 8,000 acres in Green Valley. I was blessed to start with 22,000 acres in Summerlin. So where do you start? You know what I mean? How do you build value? Mm-hmm. How do you take something and create value when there's no homes out there and nobody really wants to live out there? How do you make it work? And it's about programming. And in the big picture, and I'm not going to say I take credit for what happens on the Strip, because all those guys are brilliant and they're genius and they do great things. But without planned communities, without the presence of a quality of life and pay people where people can imagine where they'd want to raise their children, I'm not sure these hotels could have attracted the kind of quality people they've attracted to take jobs here and help Vegas become what Vegas has become. I mean, it's nice when the husband or the wife has a great opportunity here. It's another thing when they bring the family out and they said, we're never going to live in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And in those days, that was our reputation. And we'd have people say, oh yeah, I'll come on Monday and I'll leave on Friday. I live in California. I don't want to really move here, but I'll work for you. I mean, that doesn't work. So,
so that's how it's all.
So from my point of view,
interrelated, yeah.
From my point, building plan, having planned communities, and I take credit for, if you want to say that, for helping launch the first one. Everybody started doing planned communities. Vegas became a town of planned communities, and I think the planned communities played off the success of the hotels. The hotels played off the success of the planned communities, mm-hmm. and everybody flourished, and Vegas became a great place. So,
okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you more details about all of that, but let me get through some of your.
Is it an hour yet?
Your other, we're doing well. We're pacing well. Your other achievements and accolades. So you've served in organizations including Southern Nevada Strategic Planning Authority, the Andre Agassi Foundation, of which you're on the board of directors. You're a past president of the Board Class Publications.
Yeah.
What is that, by the way? I've never heard of that one.
Class Publications doesn't exist anymore, but what it was a newspaper that was printed. Sari Aisley was the woman who came up with the concept. And she felt that high school students don't have anybody to talk to. They don't read about what their problems are, other people's problems are. They don't know what opportunities they are. And she created this magazine. It was written by students, and it dealt with all the kind of issues kids have with bullying, job opportunities in the summertime, focus groups on things that people may be interested in. It was just a great newspaper that we put out once a month that was distributed to over 40,000 high school students every month.
Local,
all local, written local, distributed local, written by local. The kids in the high school, we'd have kids at each high school writing articles about what were the issues in your high school. You know what I mean? It was
sounds like this is something that should be brought back, especially in this day and age.
It should be, when Sari wanted to retire, the problem is someone takes ownership and then they want to make it their own, and then it becomes something else. Sari, it was a labor of love for this woman. I saw this was too good to be true. This is what we need. This is what kids need to know. I mean, if they've got a problem, it deals with everything. You hate your siblings. You love your siblings. Your parents aren't home. You need help on tutoring. You want to tutor. There's job opportunities. There's, you can find, as a high school student, you should be able to find, on a monthly basis, something in there that makes your life a little better, a little easier, or makes you feel like other people are having the same kind of problem. Mm-hmm. You're not the only guy that's suffering. And it was amazing. And, it was, Jim Rogers, I think Beverly got involved at one time late in the game as far as that's concerned. But, these things are good. But when the founder is involved, it's a great program because their heart and soul's in it. And they have, what high school, we had to do this really without the full support of the Clark County school system because they saw this as like, we were an outlier. We were like, who are you guys? You know, I mean, we don't like you in our schools. So, but you know, the story was too compelling to tell us not to do it. And it was amazing. It was a great achievement. And I was the president. I saw what she was doing. I got involved, but you know, it was a great thing, and it should be ongoing. But like I said, everybody wants to make it their own, and hers was a selfless effort.
Sounds like it was for the kids when she was doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
It was for the kids.
That sounds like an amazing thing.
If your kids were in high school, you would have loved this magazine.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Where do they go? Now they go on the internet, which is not exactly where you want them to go to find answers sometimes.
Anyway.
All right. So National Trustee of the National Jewish Medical and Research Center, which is the #1 respiratory hospital in the United States. Served as chairman of the UNLV Foundation, former chairman of UNLV Research Foundation Board of Directors, founding director of Clark County Business School Partnership Program. You've been active in the Clark County School District. It says more than 30 years, but is that accurate or more than 30 years? Adopted the Booker Empowerment Elementary School. That was 17 years ago, where you worked closely with the administrators and educators to create a fund for value-add programming. And you even have a school named after you.
Can you imagine that?
The Mark L. Fine Elementary School in the Southwest.
And I'm not going to say anything, and hold your ears, but the address is on Cougar Lane. I said, really? This is on Cougar Lane? You can't make that stuff up, right?
That's a good one.
But in my life, I've always believed in education. And, I can say, hey, we build planned communities and people, but if you don't have education and if the community doesn't have access, like the class magazines of the world, the school business partnerships, which I founded along with Judy Steele back in, I guess, in the early 80s. It was the idea of having a partnership and trying to get these kids in kindergarten to third grade to learn to read, write, and do arithmetic. So that, because once you turn them into the fourth grade, if they don't have those skills, they're lost. The system has to carry them. And so the idea of it was to try and get resources into the schools, not raising money, but getting businesses, getting people into the schools, adopting schools, coming in, reading to kids, doing things, seeing what needs are in each, because every school's got different needs. Every school is different. We treat every school, the school district treats every school like they're the same. Well, if this school's got it, well, that school's got to have it. Every school's different. Just as a side story, when I moved here, my wife and Carolyn Goodman were friends, and they were dealing. And Carolyn started the Meadows, as you know, way before the Meadows, and they were in junior league. I'm familiar with junior league, and they would take to all the schools all the great works of art copies, not the originals, but to show kids what's in museums, some of the names that they may be learning about, and some of exposing them to culture. It may not have been gargantuan in terms of the results, but it was trying to get resources into the school. And what they learned was every school is different. And some of the principals are all in, and some of the principals aren't all in. Some are missing in action. I'm not taking anything away from teachers and principals, because I think none of them are paid enough and none of them have enough resources. And I'm not sure how you solve the problem, because I've been working on it for 50 years and I don't feel I was very successful. But they ended up at a school called George Harris, and the school principal was a woman named Dr. Cobley, Leora Cobley. And Carolyn always, and she would literally, they lived on Bannies, and we lived over on Griffith and Oakey, if you know where that is, right by Lovett Custard, if you know where Lovett Custard is. Very bad for the weight. But, and she would literally, pick my kids up every day, and we got a zone variance. And she literally drove them to George Harris every day. It was an amazing school with an amazing principal. Short story, Carolyn was on a mission to start her own private school. She finally got Howard Hughes Corporation to donate some land. And who was her first hire? The Dr. Cobley from the George Harris School. And she was the founding headmistress of the Meadows School, which started over on Meadows Lane behind Fletcher Jones, on land that was donated by Fletcher Jones. And the kids would bust from, Green Valley, from Quail Ridge, from wherever they lived to this private school. But, they're on the bus a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it was. It was as many challenges you could possibly have. People were paying $6,000 a year to send their kids to private school. Unheard of. You know what I mean?
That would be a bargain today.
Today, it's an unbelievable. That's 25% of what they're paying today. I'm like saying, I'm going to spend $6,000 a year to send my kids to private school. A couple of my kids went. My older kids were too old by the time the Meadows came on to go to it. Jonathan spent a little time there. Katie spent a little time there. And, but that was the birth of my school. And the point was every school is different. Mm-hmm. Every school has different needs. I've tried to approach, different approaches in terms of, getting resources into schools. And it wasn't easy. I adopted a school at the end of the day saying, well, maybe I should just take one school and work one school and make it better because I can't do it.
Did that work?
Yeah, I think it worked. I think they had an amazing principal who was amazingly dedicated, who did a fantastic job. Beverly Mathis was terrific. And what happened was we had some unbelievable programs. We created she thought, anybody that had money, you have money, we want to do that. I said, we're not doing anything for money. We're going to do money because we're adding value to the kids that go to the school. So that was her mission, was to get these teachers to start to put programs together that added value that may have needed money to help them, but to create the resources. And one of the best programs we had, well, she had one program. Any kid and this is Booker School. It's not in the highest income neighborhood. Any kid that didn't miss a day of school got to go bowling with the principal. She and I would take the kids bowling to the Silver Nugget or wherever it would be, and we'd arrange for buses and things like that. You know how many kids had a perfect record? It was unbelievable in challenged neighborhoods. It was unbelievable. She had programs, after school programs, for parents who didn't graduate high school. They could help tutor them so they could help their kids with their homework. If the kids didn't show up from school, she went out and found them. We did a program one time for a number of years, where the kids who got all fifth graders who had good grades and showed up got to go to San Diego to Sea Camp. Sea Camp. I think it was 2 nights or 3 nights. We'd drive them down on buses. They'd stay in dormitories. We'd turn them over to the SeaWorld counselors. They'd take the kids. They put them in wetsuits. They were diving. They were looking for things under the water. They were dissecting things. They were surfing. They were going on little sunset cruises at night. And, I helped with the money to do that. But I made sure that other people had vested in it. Mm-hmm. But what an amazing program. And I thought, here's a good program. These kids are going to be motivated in the second, third grade.
I imagine some of these kids have never been out of town.
They've never been out of town. Let alone. They've never been to Lake Mead. They've never been to Lake Mead. Yeah. Huh? It's unbelievable when you get out and see, what these kids have been exposed to. It's shocking.
And what someone else might just take for granted.
Never been to Lake Mead. How about that? Get them to San Diego, and that was such a memory for them. And we did it over and over. And then I think Beverly decided to retire. We have a terrible system in the city. Beverly hit her 25-year pension or whatever it was. And if she wanted to continue to work, she'd work for whatever she was getting paid. She could quit and still get her pension, and she could take a job someplace else and get double salary. But she couldn't get a double salary, or there's no incentive for her to stay. And then they brought somebody else in who liked the brand of what was created, and then it wasn't sustainable unless somebody else had the commitment that she had, and which was a great experience. I'm still involved in a certain way. I try and I'm always looking for ways to be helpful. So now I'm to the point where I'm about teacher appreciation. I always have a back to school party for the teachers. In one of Jonathan's restaurants, I have a end of the school party, which you're welcome to go to because we're starting all the end of the school parties. I have a holiday party. So it's to get the teachers motivated, that someone appreciates what they do. You know what I mean? We'll bring in, we might bring in the coffee bean sometime, or Jamba Juice or something like that in their teacher lounge or something. But I've tried so many ways over the years, to try and find ways to do a better job with education. And
that's fascinating. It's clearly a point of passion for you.
And the same goes with the UNLV.
Yeah.
Because
you have a lot of involvement there.
Yeah. There's no great community that doesn't have a great university, and the more, people take for granted, oh, I went to Arizona, I give my money to Arizona. I went to Harvard, I said, by the way, your business is here, and your employees need to be educated, and you need a pool of employees, and they need to be educated and trained. And I said, this is where you should be giving their money. That's your involvement with the foundation. Yeah, that was my foundation. I helped start what they call the Contemporary Art Institute on the UNLV campus with Dr. Maxon back in the 80s. It was me and Roger Thomas and Steve Molaski and Elaine Wynn and Mike Saltman. We all got together, and it was you're only limited by your imagination those days. And Maxon saw it, and he created space on the campus because everybody wanted to have their own art museum, right? Well, if 10 people want to have an art museum, you're never going to build an art museum. You got to start small, and you got to build up. And, so art was part of it. And that translated over. I don't know if you saw Green Valley, if you've ever seen the sculptures in Green Valley.
So where I grew up was 2368 Aqua Vista, which is just off of Green Valley Parkway, say in between Sunset and Warm Springs.
Okay.
And so oftentimes, right, the bike up to the library, climb around on those statues right in front with kids with the hose. But then
that's Jonathan with the hose.
Is that really?
Oh, yeah.
Is this like a fun fact that nobody knows?
What am I going to advertise
it? So if you live in Green Valley or have been
Lloyd
there,
Hammerl
you see these statues.
Lloyd Hammerl did the Serpent's Mound, which was taking all the rock that was there on Green Valley when we started, and kind of created some symbolically, the serpent, this mound of rock. That this is what it started as, and Lita Albuquerque did the obelisk. So we can you see the sun when the sun. They're all learning tools. They're all supposed to be learning tools. And but before that, what really got me started was going into an Urban Land Institute meeting and seeing these tennis players. And we've had the tennis players out at some point in time. But they're realistic art, outdoor sculpture. And the way people related to them, I said, boy, this, I can't afford to do art in Green Valley. And if I did art, nobody, I'd buy art and nobody would know what they're looking at. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I found the woman that basically represented the artist and made a deal back in the 80s to bring art, and every 6 months we bring a different set of sculptures, and it became like a thing to do when you came to town. People touched them and they took pictures with them, and it was a way to introduce art to people.
I climbed on them, all of them pretty much.
It was a way to introduce art to people and make them exposed to things that, otherwise you miss that. So that was just part of what I did. Some of the things that I like to do. Like say, you get up every day and you could have a new idea. That was a great thing about
I
Vegas.
certainly appreciated them growing up. And I remember family would come into town from Israel, let's say, and they'd see it. They'd go crazy for these sculptures.
Anyway, it turned out to be a big thing. And the funny thing is I did the same thing at Summerlin, and I had more money when I did Summerlin. And then and I had some great stuff, 100,000, 200,000 pieces. And then one day I came and said, geez, where'd all the art? And I bought some pieces because I developed in Summerlin. After I left, I started doing these small office projects and some retail. They let me, I was too much of a non-corporate guy to stay with Howard Hughes too long, but they gave me opportunities to do projects stuff they couldn't do, like these small buildings, Village Center Circle, if you know where Village Center Circle. I mean, all those buildings I developed, subdivided, and sold the land off, and so people could build their own. So part of what I did is I put a Sarah Winnemucca statue in the middle of it. And then one day, all the statues are gone. It was like, a movie, like, where'd the statues go? So corporate didn't want the statues anymore. They said, liquidate them. It's too much of a risk. and they got to be maintained, and they're too expensive. I paid for 2 of those. You could have told me, but there was art gone bad. But what I did do in the library, like the Green Valley Library, but the Summerlin Library, I had a replica of each of the Howard Hughes airplane. I did a whole storyboard on Howard Hughes, so people could go and kind of see the origin of the land and learn about the guy that bought the land, for whatever that's worth. But
that's pretty cool. You mentioned ULI, Urban Land Institute, that you've been involved with for also says 30 years.
40. 45, 40, more than 40.
YPO, Young Presidents Organization. Trustee,
one of the founding members.
Yeah, Trustee Emeritus, former executive committee with the NDA, which is now called the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance.
Right.
So when it says Trustee Emeritus, what's Trustee Emeritus, former executive? What is?
I was on it long enough where they basically said, hey, we're going to make you an honorary board member for life. I wasn't as active as I used to be, but that was a way of, it was a nice honor and it was a nice recognition. Just as a side story, if you're interested, one of the things that I did for the NDA, Nevada Development Authorities, I said, look, we got Paul Axel in Washington. I don't know if you remember Paul Axel, Ronald Reagan's best friend. Everybody wanted to be friends with Paul Axel. I said, he can, we need to diversify our economy. Who's better to introduce us to every corporation in the country who's lobbying him than Paul Axel? So I used to take 8 to 10 guys to Washington twice a year. And his office would set up meetings all over the place. We'd meet with corporations. We'd meet with the Nevada delegation. We wanted to let them know what we're doing, what was going on. If people saw somebody that was a potential candidate, whether they're Nevadans that were living in Washington who met somebody that we were on their mind in terms of, to diversify the economy. So one year, we went back. And in those days, you could go into the Congress, the senator's office. You walk in and out of the buildings, there were no metal detectors. Metal detectors are something new. So we entertained the Nevada delegation in, I think, the Mansfield room. It's one of the M's, Monroe, Mansfield, 100 members of the Nevada delegation. When I say delegation, any Nevadans living in Washington were invited, especially the staff members of our congressmen and our senators and anybody else that was there. And we did our little pitch. We had a little cocktail party. It was a little networking thing, yada, yada, yada. And we went home, had my tea, got in bed, and I turned the news on, breaking news. Bomb goes off in the Madison room at the Capitol building.
Serious?
This is honest. This is you can check those facts out. A bomb went off in that room after we left. Somebody left a suitcase. We never got to it, but I could tell you one thing. From then on, there were metal detectors in all the Capitol buildings. There were no medical detectors before.
Wow.
That. So Nevada, that was our country.
So presumably somebody brought a bomb in to either cause terror or assassinate someone that was in the room?
There were no terrorists at that time. We didn't,
So it wasn't a terror. It was like a hit kind of a thing.
We don't know what it was. We never knew what it was. It was like, we're watching TV. I mean, I think, a lot of guys.
How did you feel about that, sitting there knowing that you could have been in the room when it went off?
Well, it scares the crap out of me. There's nothing but just scares the crap out of you. You just realize that how vulnerable these buildings are. That anybody can walk in any building with any kind of metal detector. That doesn't happen. It's a sad thing about our society that this is what it's become. But that was, and I was, as the chairman of the Washington committee, I spoke, I was there, but, we had such great response from people who wanted to be helpful, who loved Nevada. We had so many great resources. And, anyway, that was not the last trip we took, but it was, we were much more careful.
Wow.
Anyway, that was just something that a lot of people really don't know about. But you can check it out on the web.
No, I believe you.
No, I'm just saying. I Googled it to make sure I wasn't,
To make sure you're remembering it like you remembered it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Mike Saltman. He's actually been on this podcast. Right. And also Summer Hollingsworth has been here too.
Yeah. Summer was he was on the NDA, ran the NDA for a while, a banker in town, a great guy, great community leader. Mike Saltman and I have been friends trying to do the same thing, building community facilities, amenities, supporting community activities. Not always the same way, sometime together, but never against each other.
One common denominator is that as you're creating professional achievements, each of you and Saltman, each of you have reinvested in the community, both with time and resources,
right,
monetary and other. Is everyone like that?
Everybody's different. It's the same thing.
Is that
Mike and I were like-minded. There were plenty of guys who were just out for themselves. There were plenty of guys who just wanted to have, there was, one of my buddies who was a developer used to say, "He who dies with the most toys wins." But which is kind of trying to be funny, but in those days, Las Vegas needed everything, and there was opportunities to do good everywhere you went, and so. I would say even today that I don't find people that are committed to building this community, and it's how much you can accumulate, how much you can do. And I'm not sure how much they, pass on that old saying of tikkun olam, right? Make the place better, heal the world. And, I don't see the balance. And, I'd like to see more of it. I don't think we do. I don't think we do enough. But that's what gives me opportunities to do things, because everybody's not doing what I'm doing and I'm not doing what they're doing. I just happen to feel that raising a family and community was a big part. And I had a great opportunity to do some great things. Looking back, I mean, it was like, hey, that's very cool stuff. When people tell me they live in Green Valley, that it may be your age, that were raised in Green Valley, and that's where they want to raise their kids, it's the highest compliment. Right?
Yep. I grew up in Green Valley, but I married a West Side gal. So now I live in Summerlin, and that's where we're raising our family.
It's all the same. They're great communities.
We're in the Willows. Were you involved in that community?
Love the Willows. The Willows, I have good stories for everything. When I left Summerlin, I was trying to, the Willows hadn't been done yet. I did Eagle Hills. I did Tournament Hills. I brought in all the product, the people who do the product for, the TPC. Because I call that an amenity village, and I wanted that to be a high-end luxury village as opposed to the other villages which I call primary home villages. Doesn't make them one less than the other, but the price ranges are different, So, and Summerlin just became the place to be. Tournament Hills was the place to be. Eagle Hills was the place. It took time for them to become the place to be. Believe me, there was a lot of dirt out in Eagle Hills when I started, and it's become like one of the best communities in town. Then the Picolis came and said, "Hey, that's what we want to do." I said, "Well, that's what they're doing. You can't do what they're doing. You got to be different. You got to find a different way to differentiate yourself." So, what I did at Summit with Queens Ridge North, Queens Ridge South, is I built one guard gate for multiple products. There was a custom home community. There was a high-end semi-luxury community. And there were three home builder communities, but they're all high end, not entry level, not first time move up, but like second time, and semi-custom, and then a custom home community. And it became a huge hit, and because I had good builders, and that was to compete with someone. And how do you compete with the other ones? You got to have something better. And then what did they do? They said, "Hey, that's the way to go." They did the Willow. So, you can, you feel like you had a part of all these different things. I can't take credit for everything, but, the idea is that, hey, how do you compete? How does Piccoli, you've already been jumped over. The Summerlin's doing the stuff that you want to do. Who's going to buy from you? How do you create demand?
Yeah.
And the Willows is, I think, one of the great and not identified, but it's one of the great little residential communities in Summerlin.
Mm-hmm.
It's understated. It's convenient to everything. It's got great product. It's got amazing open space and parks. Kids come home to school. My favorite thing is they dump their backpack and they go out to play in the car because they know there's just a group of guys that are always going to be there. And
so now I have you on video. I could show this to my wife if she ever thinks about moving out of the Willows. I'm going to tell her Mark Fine said this is one of the finest, among the finest communities we can find.
I still believe that. Yeah. What part of the Willows do you live in?
We're in Eden Ridge, which is the single-story product.
Yeah.
So everything you said is what I love about it, but also we're at the very north part of the community. So when you walk out of the gate from our house, like we just cross one street, walk out of the gate, and we're a block from downtown Summerlin, walking distance.
You can't replace that location.
You can't replace it. It's irreplaceable.
You videoing this thing? I thought you said
Yes.
just on. You told me we're only on. It was a podcast, but no, I think it's.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the. It's understated. It's charming, and it's very family oriented. Very family oriented.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a big believer. I mean, I've been in my house 21 years, 22 years. I'm not a move around kind of guy. I'm not looking for the next best thing, but I do believe the inspiration from the Willows came from Queens Ridge North, because Queens Ridge North had to compete with the Hills Village, or the TPC Village.
That makes sense.
It's a good story.
It's a great story. Well,
or it's a good story. Yeah.
We'll shift gears. I ask everyone the same question. What has been the single most influential thing or event in your life that shaped you the most?
The single most important thing that shaped me the most, well, obviously, having a family is the single most important thing that shapes you, and having a mission and leaving the world a better place. And I don't think there's one single thing. I've lived a life basically that, it's not a legacy life. It's a life that, I feel I've helped make Vegas a better place. I look at Green Valley. I look at Summerlin. I look at Queens Ridge. I know I've had a part of so many different things. I got to do the sheriff's building, the
Metro headquarters.
I got to do Metro, which is a good story on its own. But I've had a chance. I've done high rise office. I've done high rise condos, Park Towers. I was Irwin's partner in doing Park Towers, which is still one of the great, I think, high rise condos in the country. But it's that location has been challenged in terms of what it is, but it's still full, and it's still coming into the Strip and things like that. So just accumulating the things I've done, and hopefully that I've been a value added, and that, what you want to be at the end of the day, you want your kids to say, are you Mark Fine's kid? And not have them duck. You just want to leave a good name. That's all you can do. It's not money. It's a good name, because that's all you want for your kids to know when you're not there, that you're part of a good family.
You've mentioned value add quite a bit. So I'm going to take this question in a different way. Where did that come from for you? What either made this impression on you, or what influenced you to make this your mantra of always add value, leave things better? Where did that come from?
I just, I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but I know that when I was starting to do Green Valley, we didn't have the money to do Green Valley. We, everything in those days, it was a whole different kind of market. But I knew that I was better off doing nothing than something bad. And if I couldn't add value to all this 8,000 acres that we owned by doing something bad, that I shouldn't do it. So I kind of created this, it's not isn't probably in the dictionary. I didn't make the name up, but
you applied it.
I always use value add. I always don't do something if you're not adding value. Don't, in your life, do things that add value to your life. That's going to make your life better. Don't do negative things. Be with organizations, the things that you're doing. these are value add. You're doing great things for the community.
You mentioned this concept of tikkun olam, which is this Jewish principle of, it translates to heal the world. And in practice, it's a day-to-day practice of exactly that. It's whatever it is that you're doing, leave it in a better condition in which you found it. And that continues to, I could see, value add. And if I'd rather do nothing than something bad. If I'm going to do something, it has to add value. Do you think that that's where it derived from?
I'm not sure where it derived from, but you mean the word tikkun olam and value add?
But for you specifically in applying this.
I look back at the word tikkun olam came really into my life later, value add after value add.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I said, oh, well, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. You just want your kids to be prepared to do what they do and take it to the next, and then they're going to, because we're only here for a moment in time. And it doesn't matter what you've done or who you are. If you've left kids that can't be a value added, then have we failed? And I'm very lucky. I have 4 kids, and my wife has a daughter, and they're all, I consider, contributing members and doing good things and raising good kids. And I see people, they could be doing more in their community. It's we got so self-absorbed that sometimes we forget there's a bigger picture here. And, all you can do is try and remind people of that, and you got to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Yeah. Your bio starts at Green Valley, but talk to me, go back. I know you were born in Ohio, raised in Ohio.
Well, you want to hear the sad part of my life?
Sure. Is there a sad part?
There's always a sad part. I grew up in a place called Shaker Heights, Ohio. Now, Shaker Heights, Ohio is one of the first planned communities in the country. It's outside of Cleveland, which was a lot of inspiration for me for what I wanted to, what I did in Green Valley. It was a different time, different price points, different things like that. But, they had a culture. They had schools strategically located. They had churches and temples and parks and all that kind of stuff. So to that certain extent, growing up in a planned community, and there's a book on it, which is great, I thought was developed inside of me what I saw what potential could be. ULI was great because I went around the country looking at other planned communities, but you have to find what works here. Every city's different. Every community's different. But when I went to, I went to Shaker Heights schools, and in my senior year of high school, here's the sad part. In the senior year of high school, in October, my parents had a turn of events business-wise, and my dad said, we got to move. We're moving to Arizona. I have a job in Arizona. And it's my senior year. I said, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, I'm moving across the country, and my family is me and my sister, my 2 parents, on a little Ford Falcon. We drove to Phoenix, Arizona, and I registered in my second high school called Central High School on Central Avenue, coincidentally, in Phoenix. And a month and a half later, my dad said, well, the company wants me to move to Tucson. I said, well, let me at least finish my first semester in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. Finished my first semester in Phoenix, and then I registered in Tucson at Rincon High School, and I finished my second. So I went to 3 high schools in my senior year, which was, I guess for some people, traumatic. For me, I always see things as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I never really felt bad for myself. I always looked at the opportunities, but coming from Cleveland, which had a very Jewish influence, and to Phoenix, which was a transition, not nearly as like Phoenix, to Tucson, that really had very small Jewish population. Sometimes you'd find a place for yourself. But I made the best of everything, and I graduated from Tucson. And within the same 12 months, I registered at the University of Arizona. So in 12 months, I went to 3 high schools and college, which was, it's all part of life's experience, right? So it is what it is. And that's what they hand you. And I did 4 years in Tucson. I was probably not the most exemplary student. It took me 5 semesters to figure out that, that I actually had to have 125 units to graduate, and I only had 44. So I had to find a way to find 80 units in the next 3 semesters. So I took 20 units a semester plus 2 full units in summer school and graduated on time. I was able to neutralize a lot of the D's that I had by getting A's and B's from my last 3 semesters when I realized going to class and taking notes, made a big difference in how your school performance was. And then I moved to New York because a friend of mine said, "Hey, where are you going to go?" I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to do." He said, "Well, I'm moving to New York. Why don't you move to New York?" I said, I've really never been to New York. And, I talked to some people and I got in a car and I drove. I did a tour, domestic tour. I went from Phoenix to Tucson to LA to San Francisco to Vegas to Denver. I did a cross-country tour where I had friends in all these different cities. Went to Boston. My grandfather was in Boston. He set me up with 2 suits, gave me a couple $100, and I drove into New York City without a job and $200 and 2 suits and a friend of mine who let me sleep on their couch. And they mentored me in terms of how to get a job. And within about a week and a half, I had a job working for a chemical bank, which was one of the biggest commercial banks in the country, in their management training program. The most remarkable thing on that was when I had to fill out the application, it was like, what was your grade point average? Well, I graduated. I got all my grades. I graduated. You had to have a C to graduate. So I said, what am I? I put a C down. No one's going to look at me. So then I realized at Arizona, these little opportunities in life, 1 was an A, 2 was a B, 3 was a C, 4 was a D, and 5 was an F. So if you had a 3.0 at Arizona, you had a C average. Mm-hmm. But if you had a 3.0 and as far as the rest of the country is concerned,
that's pretty good.
You had a B average.
Yeah.
And I went, they put me in their management training program. I went downtown.
It's funny that
it was unbelievable. And the guy that interviewed me from the job, which is even more unbelievable, he's interviewing me and he says, my best friend's daughter went to the University of Arizona. I said, really? I said, what's her name? He told me the name. I says, I'm there 30,000 kids there. So he calls her up. He says, what do you know about Mark Fine? And she gives me this glowing thing. She didn't have to do anything. I knew her, but I didn't know her that well. Fortunately, I never took her out because she would have probably given me a bad review. But anyway, they gave me the job, and I was in their. I was in the mortgage and real estate department making commercial construction loans. But the first thing they do is send you down for financial analysis, where you dig into financial, analyzing financial statements, left, right, and center, because everybody's gives you phony financial statements, a la Donald. And I don't want to mention any names, but I said, you can get them on a lot of things, maybe. But you can't get them on falsifying financial statements because everybody makes assumptions on their financial statements, and it's up to us to dig into them. We're a bank. We're sophisticated. We can validate what it is. But I learned how to analyze a financial statement upside down.
Were you a finance major at U of A?
I was a real estate major.
Real estate major.
And frankly, not to be mentioned on the podcast, but you can mention it. I ended really in the real estate department because it was the only school at Arizona that didn't require a foreign language.
So to duck foreign languages, you ended up in real estate.
I was in real estate. So from there, I got married.
Wow.
In New York, had 2 kids, to a girl from Las Vegas, and she went to school with me in Arizona. She traveled with me most of the way when I came, and we spent a lot of time, and she kept visiting me, and then we ended up getting married. And it took me about 8 months to get my feet navigated in what I was doing, because I had no idea what I was doing. And then I'm making construction loans, and I'm partnering with other major banks in New York, and we were making, iconic loans. The World Trade Center was there, but it was built by the Triborough Bridge Authority. It was a public building at the time. It became went private later, and there was only one tower at the time. And So I worked there and I met a lot of people. And then all of a sudden I got a call from a big Wall Street investment banking firm and said, hey, we'd like to meet you. And then I moved down to 42 Wall Street a year and a half later and worked in corporate finance and managing the real estate assets of a major New York investment banking family. And I did that for 4 years. And before I migrated out here, because it was time, I had 2 kids. I was living in a 900 square foot apartment with 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. And it was either, my father-in-law said, hey, why don't you come out here? And I really didn't want to come out without the right credentials. You always like to have a good safety net wherever you go, because if it doesn't work out, you don't want to be at a dead end.
So it was important for you to really build yourself up in your experience before
Yes.
coming to work or coming to the community where your wife is from.
Because it can be overwhelming. and people, they may want to just, basically identify you in a certain way, but it was a great move for me. He put a lot of confidence in me. The beginning of Green Valley and what I found when I got here, he had a partnership with some gentlemen that were supposed to have money. And, in those days, I mean, it was a totally different kind of place. And
so when you moved here, did you start working directly on Green Valley?
I did not. There was no Green Valley. There was a concept of Green Valley that Hank was a partner in, and he had partners. And he asked me if I would sit on the board, represent him as far as that's concerned.
But the board seat, was that your job?
My job was, when I got involved, I was going to be a developer. He had a lot of different things that he was doing that weren't being attended to. I didn't really have an interest in doing them, but I did them because if you see things hemorrhaging, you can't sit back and watch. You know what I mean? So I got involved in what he was doing and helping him out and doing some things and getting involved in my own real estate development. And then the Green Valley thing turned out where it started out, we had a partner. There was a partner by a guy named D.K. Ludwig, who was a big, he started Westlake Village, if you know Westlake Village in California. He was a big oil shipper. He had hotel companies. He was a billionaire in those days. He was one of those billionaires. And he came to town, and Hank connected with him, and they were going to, Hank had land in Green Valley. It wasn't 8,000 acres. The city of Henderson was putting up for sale 5,600 acres. It wasn't a BLM auction, but they were looking for someone that would help them develop Henderson. And then when his team, when it came time to dot the I's and cross the T's, Ludwig decided he didn't want to be in Las Vegas. It was the leftovers for whatever reason, the leftovers of the mob, his reputation. There was not enough velocity here in those days. It wasn't just a big enough market for him to be involved in. But the guys that worked for him were so compelled that this was a good deal that they stayed on, and they just stayed on with Hank. So Hank ended up with Ludwig's guys, but he didn't end up with Ludwig's money. And then they were starting to break the land up into ways that were not adding value to the property. In fact, would jeopardize the holdings of the property, all the holdings of the property. So what I tried to do is put a stop to that. I tried to find a new partner, which we couldn't find because it was very hard to find somebody that actually wanted to be in Las Vegas in those days. And then I started selling land in order to get cash flow, because there was no cash flow. I started selling land off south of what is now I-215. It was called the Henderson Cutoff in those days. I was selling 10-acre parcels, and I probably sold a couple thousand acres of 10-acre parcels. It was 10% down in 20-year terms, $25,000 for the 10 acres. So, what that land's reselling for today, it's unbelievable. But the point is, it gave me a flow of cash that I could use to sustain my overhead until I could develop a market for the product that I was doing. Because, these things at the front end, you're always, it's a loss leader. You got to do loss leaders. So, part of what it taught me, and taught me or knew it, is there was nobody writing any big checks. There was no easy money. And the only way you're going to develop money is to find a way to take the resources you have and convert them into cash somehow. My friends would not buy the land from me because they thought it was a land scam. Like, who would buy 10 acres of land Oh, it was a bladed road, and if you wanted water and sewer, you had to dig a well in a septic tank. Anyway, so the people that bought it were the valet parking guys, the guys that worked in the servers in the hotels, bell captains, and that type of thing. And one of the great things, achievements, it's not an achievement, but when you're sitting in office, oh, you see that guy? He retired thanks to you. He said he bought 10 acres from you back in 1975 or something like that. And that land started selling for $500,000 to $1 million an acre. Mm-hmm. So some guys got out at $250,000. Some guys held on, whatever it was. But that was, when you're doing any development, and you know this because you're a developer, you got to have patient money. You can't depend on the fact that you're going to be fully leased the day that you open, and there's going to be a cash flow. You've got to have patient money. And I had to develop a flow of patient money, and it gave me the opportunity to develop Green Valley in the orderly way it needed to be developed in order to maximize the value for the residual property, because we still had, if we started with 8 and I sold 2,500, we still had, 5,000-6,000 acres. And if you go back into in the archives and you look at McDonald Highlands and Seven Hills, you'll see a lot of their land assemblages were some of the land they bought from me. Not directly, but McDonald bought a lot of land from me. But it was all I could do to survive at that time. There was nothing. There was nothing out there.
Yeah. So you mentioned your father-in-law, Hank.
Yeah.
Say more about him for anyone who might not know who that is or your connection to him.
Yeah. Hank was a great guy. He was a newspaper man. He was a fighter. He was a gun runner. When I say gun runner, he was helping to get guns to Israel in 1948 when there was an embargo on Israel. As far as the United States was embargoing guns to Israel, they wanted Israel not to declare their statehood. They wanted them to wait, and Ben Gurion wouldn't wait, and the United States and a lot of the other rest of the world would not send weapons to help them defend themselves. And it took a lot of guys, underground guys. Hagen, in fact, Hank lost his civil rights for many years that were restored by Kennedy because of what he was doing. But he was a newspaper man. He was a fighter. He was a civil rights activist. He did a lot of things, great things for the community. He epitomized a guy that added value. His presence here added value, and did a lot of good things for the community and represented the community well in the community and around the country. And the fact to be associated with him and to have his confidence was an honor. And I look back at it, he really put a lot of responsibility in my hands. But he was a visionary as opposed to an operator, and I was more of an operator than maybe the visionary that he was. And he saw things that I didn't see, and I saw things that he didn't see. And but he wanted to do his newspaper thing, and he must have liked what I did on the real estate side because we launched it. And I think that before he passed, he said he never imagined it could be. And it wasn't even that big. I mean, Vegas he wouldn't even recognize Las Vegas today. It's become something that none of us could have envisioned in a very cool way, in a great way. And to be a part of it is great.
So it's Hank Greenspun who we're talking about, in case someone didn't pick that up. But is that how Green Valley was named, from Greenspun, or is there something else? Green Valley
was named because it had the Greenspun name to it. It was a planning name. It wasn't intended to be the name of the project. But we had so many years of planning, and Green Valley was always the name that we had planning. It wasn't a valley, and it wasn't green. But, at the end of the day, we said, let's just go with a name that everybody recognizes. And so that was the genesis of Green Valley. And the genesis of American Nevada Corporation was, if you look at the Ludwig property, the name of the company that was his development company was American Hawaiian.
So the holding company was American Hawaiian, and you guys
Ludwig's company.
Ludwig's,
was
right?
American Hawaiian. The company we named here was called American Nevada Corporation. And even though Ludwig ended up not doing the deal, we kept that, in those days, I don't know how many people would recognize the name. It was really before I got here. I came here in 73.
Yeah. I want to ask about now the contrast between Green Valley and Summerlin. Before I do, you mentioned a book about master plan when you were talking about that you lived in one of the first master plans, and there was a great book about it.
There was a book, Urban Land Institute. They go into some of these areas and they do these studies. I can't remember what the studies are called, and then they publish them. And I think that the study they did on the Irvine Company and the development of Irvine and how it got started, and dealing with villages and dealing with there were a lot of takeaways I could take with that. Mm-hmm. A lot of traveling around the country. The government provided some programs before I came to town because they saw the benefit of master plan communities, but they didn't understand the economics of master plan communities. So they provided government guarantees for people to go and float bonds to fund the front end side of a lot of master plan communities around the country. The problem is that there wasn't patient money, and a lot of these guys went busted before they could actually get to the development phase or get enough development going to actually pay the interest on the bonds. And most of them failed. The only one that didn't fail, believe it or not, was the one in Houston, which was owned by, I'm trying to, the name escapes me of the planned community, but it's, Howard Hughes owns it now. And because he was an oil man, he had the resources to keep it going when it going got tough. And then it became another one of the great planned communities in the country. And I'm sure you'll know the name, but, I went blank on as far as that's concerned. So the ULI's got a lot of great resources. I've always told the guys, they expose me to people in the business. I tell guys like you, go to the meetings. You'll meet people doing business all over. You'll see product that should be here, or you'll understand the economics of product, things that you can be done here as opposed to reacting. You can be proactive as far as how you're developing and doing that type of stuff. So, Urban Land Institute has been a very significant part. They don't tell you how to do it because at the end of the day, you're the guy responsible for making the decision. But you're also the guy responsible for getting as much information so you make good decisions based upon having as much information available as you possibly can. And, that's your success and failures in your own hands. And it's you either got to have them financed properly, you got to understand the marketplace, and you got to try and understand what you're trying to create. If you're a home builder and you're buying 20 acres and putting 80 homes up, you're putting 80 homes up. But whatever you're doing, the next time you do another community, they're going to look at your other communities to see what kind of product you build before they make a commitment. So it's always good to leave something better than you found it.
So you went from Green Valley or from American Nevada, which you described really as like entrepreneurial compared to, you said you were maybe too independent or entrepreneurial to stick around too long at Howard Hughes. But give me some more contrast. What was it like in Summerlin and doing that compared to what you were dealing with or learning in Green Valley?
In Green Valley, I was dealt a hand of a market that was in 1973, 74, 75. I was in Henderson, which wasn't even close to where the development was in Green Valley. There were 2,000 homes in the whole marketplace. Vegas was still, the community college was just becoming a university. It was a whole different type of place, in terms of where it was going to go and how it was going to go. And all of us, with me, Mike, with whoever it was, we tried to take it in the place it needed to be. Green Valley eventually became what Green Valley became. And it was a wonderful thing between Green Valley and Henderson, because Henderson said, well, geez, you're really in Henderson, but you guys in Green Valley think you're better than us. So we're going to make a harder effort to do a better job in Henderson. So they built unbelievable parks. Henderson became one of the great small towns in the country. Mm-hmm. And not because of Green Valley, but indirectly.
It's not just lip service, but like what you just said about Henderson, that it's one of the greatest small towns in the country.
Right.
It's literally, you can go anywhere in America and you'd be hard pressed to find somewhere better to live.
The parks per square foot, per acre were unbelievable. I mean, the Clark County has nothing like it, but it became a little bit of a they looked at Green Valley like The county looked at us as Green Valley as Henderson. The people of Henderson looked at us as Green Valley. You're too good for us. Mm-hmm. So they made themselves better. Then we made ourselves better, and they made themselves. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like we both lifted the boat. We lifted the lake, and all the boats rose. Mm-hmm. And Henderson became a great city. And I'm not saying it, I'd like to take the credit, but I mean it was a credit of they looked at Green Valley as being we're elitists, we're too good for them. You know what I mean? You don't know the city council meetings I went to in a jail. I mean the old city hall where I'd go to my city council meetings when it was there was a jail on one side, and then there was a city council on the other side, and in a portable building. It was unbelievable, And then they built this magnificent city hall out there. I mean, those people were innovative, and they did them things, and they weren't going to let Green Valley get the credit. They wanted just as much for their city as we for Green Valley. And you sit on planes today, and people say, they're talking there. You listen, they said, "Oh, yeah, where do you live?" "Oh, we live in Henderson." I said, they wouldn't have said that 30 years ago. In Summerlin, fast forwarding, I had a relationship with all the builders. Everybody's been doing business with me, not once, not twice. The community is growing. We had the support of the library district. We had the support of the school district. We had the support, they've all had a history now of working with us, of delivering school sites, delivering this site of, we had great, what I call social engineering programs where we'd have little leagues, things that don't cost a lot of money to do, but create great community spirit, little leagues, Easter egg hunts, July 4th, all that stuff that they may have grown up living in the East that they want to duplicate for their families out here. And then, so I go to Summerlin. Now we're going, instead of doing 2,000 homes a year, the market's doing 15,000 homes a year. Green Valley became the fastest selling master plan community in the country while I was at Green Valley in 1988. And when I went to Summerlin, by the time I got to Summerlin in 1993, we became from nothing. The two communities were the fastest selling plan communities in the country. It was teed up for me, ready to go. The builders knew me. They from the old Howard Hughes guys. They get a 100-page document they'd have to read to buy the land with all kinds of conditions. And what do you do with a 100-page document? You put on your desk on the pile, and every time it gets to the top of the pile, you put it at the bottom of the pile because you're not going to read that. So when I got there, they were like, there was the relief. Someone they could do business with. Listen. They want to take advantage of you as much as they can, whatever, it's a, it's laissez-faire, but, and I was able to line up the builders and get it started and get it launched. And, my biggest, in Henderson, when I was in Henderson, my biggest problem was to say I was in Henderson. What do you think my biggest problem was in Summerlin?
To say you're in Summerlin?
No.
What was it?
Do you have an SID?
Oh, okay.
You have a special improvements district. When I started in Green Valley, you couldn't get $5 for an HOA, and now they're charging. How much is $10,000, $20,000 extra for a special improvement district that amortizes over 20 years, which means you're going to have $100 a month extra in monthly payments, and it's like it was the death wish. It was the death pill. So, being the creative guy that I am, I said, well, if you can't fix it, you got to feature it. You ever hear that saying?
No.
If you can't fix it, feature it.
Okay.
So I basically we're going to go and tell everybody, because you have a special improvement district, you have parks and open space and common areas that nobody else has in town. Right?
Yeah.
And they do. But,
and so now it becomes a sense of pride.
It neutralized the whole, because every single builder was scared out of their mind. They wanted me to pay off the SID, or they were going to pay off the SID, which just created a bigger burden as far as the development was concerned. So at the end of the day, the SID became up. Then everybody started doing SIDs. In Henderson, I think they call them LIDs. But, as a way to make an extra $20,000 a lot, or 5 lots to the acre, you make another 100,000. In those days, I was selling the land for $150,000 an acre. That's a lot of money. 150,000. I thought I was killing it. I was delivering lots to the Collins brothers back in the 70s for $6,000 a lot. I mean, those are more than the fees today are more than $6,000 a lot. Huh? But, it was whatever it was to get rooftops. Because once you get rooftops, you get people living there. You get families living there. You get people buying at the grocery store. Just as a side, talking about grocery stores, I put together in Green Valley a package. I said, put a package together. Go to all the vendors, the restaurant people, the grocery stores, get coupons and give them a welcome package and they move in. So anyway, we go to the grocery store and the grocery guy in the grocery store says, what are you guys doing? Well, we're building this planned community called Green Valley. What? I've never heard of it. So the guy comes out to see me. He says, oh my God, Smith's Food King. He says, we should be here. So the guy, who do you think flies to town 2 weeks later? D. Smith, the chairman of the board of Smith's Food King. And I make a deal with him to put a Smith's Food King in. You know where the Trader Joe's is today? Is Trader Joe still there?
You're talking. So this is Sunset and Green Valley Parkway.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I put
it's across from the library.
Across from the library.
Yes.
I put a Smith's Food King in, and I'm early on. And I'll give you one other story because we're probably running out of time. But so anyway, here's an entrepreneurial guy. I never could have got an Albertson to come in. Clearly, 5 years before, their rule of thumb would be as to before they make a commitment to build something. And he flies in. I'm dealing with the head of Smith's Food King. He's got his sons came in after him, but it's kind of cool. The other story I was going to tell you is that when I started Green Valley, and the first phase, I needed to get a grocery store, and I needed some kind of a convenience store, and because people got to shop and they can't be driving 5 miles away for convenience stuff. So, if you know where the Green Valley Grocery is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Green Valley Grocery, that was a 2,500 square foot building when I built it. I took half of it, and the other half I found a guy who's the night manager of a 7-Eleven, and I put him in business. He said he wanted to start his own business. He got a small business loan, whatever he did, and he got his license, and he's putting a sign up, and it said the Midget Market. I said, wait a minute, I'm building a planned community here. The Midget Market doesn't add value to this 8,000 acres. It doesn't say anything. Mm-hmm. You got to name it the Green Valley Grocery. He was a nice guy. He said, they're great. So there's 40 or 50 Green Valley groceries around the city. He's one of the biggest local community developers. Here's a guy who was a night manager. Wow. And still the name of it is Midget. If you look at the ownership, it's still called the doing the business entity. As the entity is the Midget are doing business as the Green Valley Grocery. The nicest guy, Rick Crawford. If you ever you want to do a podcast on that guy, he's an awesome guy.
So do you know Rob Moore?
Sure.
So Rob was actually just on the podcast. He's working at Green Valley Grocery now, doing all their acquisitions and dispositions.
The guy it was unbelievable. And I mean, and I.
Do you know how many times I've been in Green Valley Grocery as a kid?
All the time.
All the time. We'd ride our bikes there and buy candy or ice cream or whatever and go home.
I thought I got a grocery store to come in. And then all of a sudden, he buys $1.5 million suite at the Smith Center. He's the biggest contributor to the Philharmonic. He always appreciate what I do for him. A lot of guys think they do. But, it's nice when whether I did it or I didn't do it, the fact that, I helped him create the opportunity for it. But it was he who ran with it. And created this amazing empire for himself. And he's a wonderful guy.
I have as much time as you have, by the way. This isn't like a timed thing. So
I thought it was an hour.
No. It's long form.
You're way over.
No, it's long form.
Oh.
Gives you the opportunity to really expand and whatnot. No sound bites, no whatever. So however long you have, I have too. So we can keep rolling if you want.
Some of these stories just roll off my head, but I mean,
these are the best.
I love the.
I was literally about to ask you, tell me one of your favorite real estate stories ever.
I mean,
that's one of them.
That's got to be one of them. I mean, selling the lots and creating. What I did with the lots was I owed money. There's 10-acre parcels, so I owed money. I had mortgages on the property. I mean, I couldn't even service the mortgages. I don't want to cry poor boy, but I mean, there was no money around in those days. And so I got all my lenders I deeded the property to Valley Bank as trustee, and I had all my lenders deed their interests, their collateral interest to Valley Bank. So effectively, Valley Bank was not holding their mortgages as their evidence of their collateral for their loan, but the land showed free and clear, and all the money. The seller was Valley Bank.
Oh, that's fascinating.
The seller was Valley Bank, and they would receive the money and they would distribute the money in accordance with the lender agreement. Because I may have had 2 or 3 lenders that got money. I had to get enough money to pay the commission and things that's out of pocket expenses. But I was all about just trying to get some cash flow.
So that was a way for you to unencumber the properties and in a way to create a clear title, so to speak.
Right. And in those days, I could cut them into 10-acre parcels, not 40, because at 40, I'd have to sell it at $120,000. You know what I mean?
It would be, and nobody could buy them.
That price point's just got now is, a valet parking guy, he can.
So you created a product for like the everyday worker.
I did what I had to do to get cash flow to launch Green Valley.
Right.
Okay. In hindsight, I still had to do the same thing. There was no money. I had a loan at Bank of Nevada, Selma's Bank. Remember Selma's Bank? You don't even know who Selma is, do you? But,
Selma Blair?
Selma Bartlett.
Bartlett, yes.
Selma Bartlett. They used to call the bank in Henderson.
I thought you meant it was called Selma's, so that's what you guys called it, but it wasn't like the name on the door.
Well, everybody knew it by Selma Bartlett.
Got it.
And even Nevada, even what became First Interstate, but it was Bank of Nevada. Even they did their ads as Selma's Bank, in the Henderson office. It was Selma's Bank because Selma knew everybody. And if you needed something done, Selma would get it done for you. If she believed in you, she'd do anything for you. And she's a great story. I mean, where she is right now, but I should call her.
You should call her.
But the point was, this is not Selma's Bank that did it, but I mean, I had a $600,000 or $300,000 loan you got 8,000 acres of collateral. They said, we're not renewing the loan. We don't do land loans. I said, you don't do land loans? So what are you going to do? Shoot me? I can't pay you off. Anyway, but that's how, I was able to transfer the land to the Bank of Nevada, which was Perry Thomas at the time. I mean, it wasn't Perry directly, but, and as far as everybody knew, the land was they're buying unencumbered land, and they're buying it free and clear, and they're buying it from Bank of Nevada. And I probably regenerated.
That's very creative. Huh? That's very creative.
Well, you got to be when you have no choices. Sometimes you got to be creative as far as that's concerned. Should I have kept a tail? Should I say maybe a transaction fee for every time it changed hands or something like that? You can always second guess yourself, but something. Green Valley wouldn't be Green Valley if I wasn't able to to generate some of those sales and create some cash flow and create patient money, because you know what happens in a recession. You borrow money to get through the recession, and when the market turns around, you spend half the recovery trying to pay the loans that you borrowed to keep you going during the recession. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was kind of an interesting. Just creative financing, if you want to call it that. Creative financing.
You mentioned your kids. So I know Jeff. I know Jonathan. I went to Hebrew school with Katie.
She went to school.
Yeah, Hebrew school.
I mean,
it was actually I went to Georgie Harris. You mentioned that school also. I went there for elementary school.
So you went to her. You knew Dr. Cobley.
I don't remember.
The Meadows may have already started.
I'm trying to think what years. Probably 1990 was my last year there. I might have been there from second to fifth grade.
Yeah.
But we would get picked up from Georgie Harris on Tuesdays and go from there over to Temple Bet Shalom, which was on like East Okie. And we got to stop at Noggles on the way. Do you remember that fast food restaurant, Noggles?
Do not remember Noggles.
I think it became Del Taco. It was like a predecessor to Del Taco.
Okay.
But that was the thing. So Tuesdays and Sundays was Hebrew school, and I'm pretty sure Katie and I were in Hebrew school together. But I think about them. I don't know what Katie's up to now. I know she has a family. I don't know professionally. I imagine she's a contributing member of society and to her community. I know Jeff and Jonathan, anytime they get asked for something, it's always a yes. And they've, they operate very well-known brands and businesses in this community, from Coffee Bean to Harlow, Lestrega, Sting, Parkway Tavern. I'm sure I'm missing
The George.
The George. By the way, that is a beautiful, beautiful place.
It's amazing.
The George is a new venue at Durango.
Yeah,
Durango Casino.
They always amaze me, the things that they're doing and the effort and the energy that goes in everything doing. But they're so part of this community, and and they're asked to do things, and they do things, and it's a blessing.
It's not just the businesses; it's their contribution to the communities. It's their families that are clearly a priority for them. So my question is, what are some takeaways that you could share as far as raising a family and productive kids?
Well, I laugh, and my kids, if they listen to this, they'll probably say it didn't happen. But as they got older, you talk. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And Jonathan was pretty industrious, and Jeffrey was pretty industrious. Jonathan didn't mind going out and selling door to door. I mean, he came to town and started Sting Surveillance. I don't know if you use Sting Surveillance, but you should if you don't. Sting Surveillance is a home monitoring system for anybody listening to this. But he'd go door to door. He'd do whatever it takes, from that point of view. As they got to the age of graduation, it was, we'd have some conversations from time to time. And I think what I like to share, and my sons probably say I never said it. I said, look, the real estate business is what it was when I started. You got to have big bucks. You got to have, it's, it's a different world. It's not the entrepreneurial world that was when I started. And I says, but you got to do what you love. I said, I'll stay in the real estate business. If you want to be in the real estate business, if I can be helpful. But do what you love. Spend your life doing something you love. And, but don't go into food and beverage. I said, it's the toughest business in the world. So the moral of the story is tell the kids the opposite of what you want them to do.
That's funny.
I take nothing. These kids, there's nobody, you can't work any harder in the businesses they picked. And they're out every day fighting the battle and doing, because it's whack-a-mole in that business. You never know where the next problem is going to pop up. You can't anticipate where the next problem is going to be, and God bless them. They built amazing businesses. So, my daughters, they're awesome. They're, they were working moms. They were working earlier in life. They're more full-time moms, but they're totally active in their communities. They both live in Los Angeles. They're totally different, in terms of how they approach life. And, but they have they're friends. We're all a nice family. Everybody likes, but everybody's different. And nobody's trying to make everybody what we want them to be. They need to be what they need to be, and we can come together as a family and everybody can enjoy but they don't have to be best friends. You know what I mean? And they all bring something to the table. And, the girls are both married to guys that kind of follow the same thing. They get up every day. They go to one's one of the top executives at Netflix, and the other one's one of the top executives at Warner Brothers. And they both started at the bottom and worked their way up. And they went to work everybody. It wasn't, they weren't ordained, they weren't blessed, or whatever it is. And, they've had a lot of benefits that people don't get sometimes. But, it's a question of what if you got a nice start, it's a question of what you do with it. You either go down with it, or you go up with it. And they're out there doing great, raising great kids. And I'm honored. I'm blessed. I got 13 amazing grandkids, and, I enjoy them every day. And that's the blessing. That's what I get for whatever I did for the last 50, 60 years. So, I can be spontaneous. I can go to baseball games. I can hang out at Palisades Park for 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon. But I mean, where else would you rather be at that point? There's just so much time. You do the same thing over and over again. And, whatever time you have, you make the best use of it. And, I still take a lot of community interest in things like that. But, I leave a lot of time to be spontaneous.
Very nice. Let's do some rapid fire takeaways.
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
I thought I was rapid firing you.
Now it's rapid. So help us all solve this argument. Which is better, Green Valley or Summerlin?
They're both great. They both have a heart. Green Valley, when I left Green Valley, it was amazing in terms of people, how they embraced and loved their community. And Summerlin takes it to the next level. It may be a little more corporate, but if you go down to these different communities and the villages, there's such a pride on everybody on both sides. So everybody's lucky to have the opportunity to live in planned communities and have access to these amenities and friends and schools nearby. And, cause it's so, so important. Some of the things that bother me sometimes about the private schools is that, the kids go home and they're not necessarily in their neighborhood's not where all their high school friends are, and it's hard to reach out. Having schools properly located and having friends in the neighborhood, just like, the Willows, I don't know, your friends got to have a gang of guys that they go around with. I don't know how old are your kids.
They're 12, 9, and 7.
Are they out in the park all the time?
Well, we go with them. They're not like, well, my son now is getting to the point where he does have a friend that lives there, and we go drop him at the mall. They walk back.
They're both great communities. They're both evolved beyond my expectations.
All right, so we're not solving this argument here today.
We're not going to solve that argument.
Very good, very good answer.
I'm not taking my side.
It's like asking
me which is my favorite child.
Yeah, it occurred to me after that. That's what I was asking.
I got 13 grandkids. They all think they're my favorite. Okay,
then you're doing something. You're doing something right. So Summerlin did these deals. We talked about the Meadows a little bit, but they did these deals with large parcels for things like the Meadows. You talked about some other uses. Tell me about one of those and what was the thinking behind it?
Well, my thinking behind it was, from my point of view, and I wouldn't say they're large parcels, but I always wanted to reserve in every village a full complement of amenities, from a park to a school to a church, and everything, that there was a hub of activities within every village that we did. And where do people spend their time? They go to church on Sundays. Their kids go to Sunday school. They go to, there's the convenient parks that are all really maintained like no other parks in the valley, which it didn't start out that way because I wanted the city to maintain the parks. But the reality is, Summerlin ended up taking over all the parks, and I think they can maintain them at a level that generically the city can't do or the county can't do, because everything's got to be the same. And when it's your own community, you go to these. I take my granddaughter. I said we're going to go on the park tour, and then she's like 5, and she has to go to the bathroom in every bathroom in every park. But the good thing is they're all clean. Anyway, having all those facilities in every part of the community that's access. I put music in the park. In the Hills Park, there's a big amphitheater. Used to have concerts at the park on Friday night. And, it was to bring all life's things that go on in life, child daycare centers for kids, nursery schools, preschools. So it was important to have, and then hopefully you provide resources to school that go beyond what the school district can provide. So maybe the schools excel, but you got to remember, when you're building a planned community and you have a good cross section of people, typically they're well educated. They've been high school educated. They've been college educated, and they gravitate. And those schools get a lot of parental support that a lot of schools don't get. When I talk about every school's different, when you have a socioeconomic certain level of surrounding a school, you're going to have a lot more active parents than you're going to have in other schools. And it makes a huge difference from the teacher's point of view, from the kid's point of view. It's life-changing from that point of view, from that.
Yeah. So
we also did, one of the things that we didn't talk about is that in the early days of Green Valley in the 80s, we didn't, you had the Paradise Valley Country Club, but it was owned by the Showboat Hotel. So it really wasn't an amenity for the people that lived out there. You know, typically people who live near golf courses don't play golf, believe it or not. You know, 85% of the people who live on golf courses don't play golf. Otherwise they'd be overwhelmed. So what I did in Green Valley, and this is, I don't know if you were around, but I created an amazing athletic club.
The Green Valley Athletic Club?
Green Valley Athletic Club. I built that back in the mid 80s or late 80s. And, you know, it was 120,000 square feet. It was all world. Do you remember it? I mean, did you use it?
Absolutely, we used it.
And every Friday night we'd have the grills out there. They'd bring their families. They'd be cooking on the grills. I mean, what's a better Norman Rockwell picture than that? You know what I mean? In terms of families and doing things together and things like that. But, you know, that was an incredible hard thing to do. Getting the funding for us was incredibly hard to do because I had Security Pacific Bank, and I went to Security Pacific Bank and I said, look, I'm thinking about doing this athletic club. This is the money I need. Here's the equity I'm going to raise. I said, you know, but I'm not going to go spend the money to do this if you guys are going to tell me we don't do athletic clubs. They came back. They said, in principle, we're okay. If you do what you say you're going to do. So I do what I say I'm going to do. I come back. Now, you know what happens? The guy that in the bank branch, he's in the corporate office, he's out there to get business. When you finally put the package together to present, you got to go to a credit committee. What do you think the credit committee says to me? We don't do those kind of.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I went back to the guy, huh? You've been there before, right?
Yeah, we were members there as a family.
No, I'm telling you, you've been there before where people tell you they're going to do something.
I see.
These banks
when the front of the house, so to speak, the business development guy says, yeah, of course we could do that, we could do that. And then credit committee is always aware. Yeah. You learn something new. You know,
I learned a lot about credit committees on that one. But anyway, I went back to the guy who originally told me, who had been promoted, and I finally got him to approve the loan. He says, but, you know, this is an accommodation. It's a one-time deal. That was the genesis of how it got built. And, it just, there was so much competition in the health club business, even though I had this amazing facility with, you know, for kids and adults. And, you know, if the guy open next door is selling a membership for $15 a month, I'd lose 100 members, you know, and then my business was always, you know, I had to sell so many, there was so much attrition, you know, it was a hard thing to sustain. And then during that time, I ended up going over to Summerlin and making that transition. So, you know, I couldn't stay with it, so to speak. But Cafe Nicole started there. If you remember Cafe Nicole, that was the original restaurant in the Green Valley Athletic Club. And then they opened over on West Decatur and Sahara.
It was like upstairs when you walk in. Am I remembering it right?
You walk on the upper level, yeah. There was a restaurant up there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was an amazing, you know, like I said, I built athletic clubs, golf courses. I built the Legacy Golf Course, which was another good banking story. I mean, you know, I shouldn't tell you're airing this thing, but we were going to do the Collins brothers and I were going to do a golf course. And we had the whole thing designed and we had the whole thing planned. And one of the bankers came back to us and they said, you know, we take them to the credit committee and we don't do golf courses. I said, well, you told me you could do a golf course. He says, well, I'll tell you what we can do. We can make the loan to you unsecured as long as it says it's not for a golf course. Did you ever hear such a thing?
It's even worse for them to do that.
No kidding. No kidding. Anyway, it was, you know, some of those little mini stories over the years. You know, so many different stories as far as that's concerned. But, you know, I've tried everything. We've done so many different things. Even my son Jeffrey and I, you know, he was very heavily involved with me on the Metropolitan Police Headquarters building. You know, we bought the piece of property, you know, we totally overpaid and, you know, people were laughing. And 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 then the recession hit, made it worse. But we put a lot of equity down, so we could afford to service the debt, and but we couldn't. There's no office market, there was no condo market, there was no any market. And I got the Bank of Nevada, not Bank of Nevada, Nevada State Bank. I won't mention any names, but it was Nevada State Bank says, well, you need to pay us off. I said, there's no transactions out here. I paid the loan down. You've extended the loan for me. So we don't care about that. We want to be paid off. Anyway, it was that 2008, 2009, it was just a horrible time. And we got him to extend the loan. We could service the loan. But they were going after the guys they thought had money, and they were working with the guys that had no money because they had to find a way to work out the loan. Mm-hmm. So, we're like in no man's land. And then I think Sheriff Gillespie was the sheriff, and he was meeting with Rory Reed. You remember Rory? Mm-hmm. Rory was the chairman of the county commission at the time. And Rory says, well, the Metro's been merged since 1973, and now it's 2008, and you've never combined your facilities. You've never built one facility. So well, we just can't find the land. We can't find this. We can't find that. It's like, when they merge facilities and part of the facilities in the city hall, part of the facilities on Convention Center Drive. Rory says, well, Mark Fine owns that piece of property across the street. Why don't you call him? And that's how the Metro deal started.
So was it Sheriff Gillespie that called you?
He called Kevin Buckley, the broker for that.
Right.
And Kevin came to see me, and we put a package together. And I had to, and then we, the tenant was fiscal affairs, not the county, not the city. The fiscal affairs committee was 2 people from the county, 2 people from the city, and Bill Macbeth. You remember Bill Macbeth? Mm. He was the president of Cosmopolitan for a long time. He was a big gaming guy. He was one of the top executives at MGM. So we started a process of trying to putting a package together that we could sell them. But I had to get the county to approve, and I had to get the city to approve. And there was some people that didn't like the county, and people didn't like the city, and people didn't want anything to happen if it was going to help one of the other ones out. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, that's why nothing gets done in this country. And at the end of the day, if my reputation means anything, the fact that I've been here for a long time, the fact that I had a lot of things, the fact that I had some credibility, that it helped carry the day, and we got our approvals, but it wasn't easy, I can tell you that. And then we were able to put this thing together and pay the bank off, and it was a great project to be associated with,
So this is land that you had at MLK in like the 95, and now there are three
MLK
beautiful
Bonneville,
three beautiful buildings where the Las Vegas Metro headquarters is now.
And I mean,
that's a good one.
Huh?
That's a good story.
Well,
I'll tell you, from the outside looking in, knowing that there's going to be a project there and Mark Fine's involved with it, it seemed like it was an easy deal, and you're connected. So they came to you, but not just connected. You have to have serious capability to pull off a project like that.
You can't even imagine at any point in time, someone could have pulled the plug. Someone could have done something. Somebody could have made my life miserable. I mean, one of the commissioners went out of their way because they had a gripe with the sheriff. They didn't want anything happen in his watch that was good.
Yeah.
It was, I was going to say one other thing about that. Oh, one of the, getting the financing was unbelievably difficult. Here I have a lease. And I can't get financing. And I can't get financing because in the lease, the county has the right to buy every 5 years, they have the right to buy the building. and there was no minimum price. And with yield maintenance, you remember yield maintenance?
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with yield maintenance? It was an undetermined amount of money without a guaranteed floor or minimum price. Nobody would lend any money to me. I couldn't get financing. And I'm like, now I got this lease. I've got all my approvals. I can't get financing. Anyway, we eventually got it. We ended up selling the property to a not-for-profit entity in Arizona, selling the land. We sold the land at a nice profit. We floated tax-free bonds. I don't know if you knew this part of it.
Mm.
Tax-free bonds. The lender was the City National Bank. No, Royal Bank of Canada City wasn't even active here at the time. Royal Bank of Canada came in and made the presentation because they do that kind of stuff. Barclays also came in and made a presentation, but nowhere near as compelling. At the end of the day, through a series of time and the county deciding they wanted to do it, and there's a lot of politics between the city and the county, that we were able to basically massage it to the point that we could get our financing. And we floated like $150, $175 million bond. And at the best time you could possibly bid out a project, because every subcontractor, my biggest risk on building the buildings, honestly, was that they would be in business at the time I needed the services. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It was that 2008 recession was just, wiped, even though I had the best of the best as far as and the unions, at the end of the day, the unions were they wanted, whatever, certain, pay requirements.
The prevailing wage.
And it was another whack-a-mole. Every day it was something new. But at the end of the day, we prevailed and the project went through, and we think it's, I agree with you. I think it's a beautiful project. It's
so practical. I know some police officers that work in that facility. And we talked about, the inefficiencies of being spread out.
Yeah.
And when you're all under one roof, we all want our police to do well, like we all want our teachers to do well.
Yeah.
And from a real estate perspective, if you think about a company and the whole company, all divisions are all under one roof, the synergy that creates, the collaboration that creates, the efficiencies that creates, it's all better for them.
It's all better.
So it's a great project for our community. Actually.
And it was done right. They have parking. Typically you build a job. They're 24-hour parking. Well, typically they build. Okay, we need 1,400 spaces, but they don't take into account that the 1,400 people are coming to work on the next. They don't have a place to park, and the other people before. So they built enough parking. To cover everything. There was no weaknesses, in my opinion. There were no weaknesses to they were amazing to work with. The people that in the metro that worked with us were amazing. They were hard-nosed business people. When I say hard-nosed, they knew what they wanted, and they didn't want anything that was going to be flashy. The first thing we showed them, they said, "You need to get that out of here." And then they go, and then they do it at City Hall. They built the flashiest thing I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the metro didn't want any attention. In terms of wanted function over form, not form over function. And
that makes sense for a project like that.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, form over function, function over form wins the day. You can still make something look good, but it's got to work,
Yeah.
The same thing with the high rise. If next time you do a high rise condo, remember they should design from the inside out, not the outside in.
Okay.
You decide what you want your place to look like, what you want your floors to look like, what your floor plans to look like, and then make sure that, you build a building that can accommodate that.
That's good. Good takeaways. I've got one more
takeaway
here for, This one comes from Carol Kleinong. You know Carol.
Yeah.
She sends very warm regards, by the way.
Well, thank you. Good.
She's curious, if you didn't make it in the real estate world, Mark, what might have you considered doing?
I guess I never had to really confront that. I always believed in myself. It was like when I went to Arizona and said, "Hey, you're moving 3 times in your senior year of high school." I always looked at it as an opportunity. So I looked at everything as an opportunity. I would have found an opportunity that I would have loved. I would have embraced it. And that's where I would have spent my life. But being in the real estate business, being in a situation where you can actually make decisions and have control, get up every day. And, there's an old saying that someone taught me is we're only limited by our imagination. And to be able to use your imagination every day and do some things was pretty spectacular. And being in Vegas during the greatest growth, let's not forget that I was here during the greatest growth period of any city in the world for 25 years. So, I mean, we can pat myself on the back, but I didn't do that. I ended up here. I could have ended up in Des Moines. Maybe I would have been doing things at another level. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But, if your mindset that way, there's an opportunity in everything that you do.
That's good. I've got one more question to wrap up with. Before we do that, is there anything you want to share before we
I think I've shared
jump
enough.
off?
I've got to be some banks will be mad at me. What do you mean?
No.
We wouldn't make
They know. The ones that look, banks are interesting. There's banks that, they do what they do and they don't do things that are out of their box. And when they know that, it's wonderful. Yeah. When it's a quick no, I tell bankers all the time when we're building a relationship, if it's a no for you, you're not going to offend me. A quick no is better than a prolonged no.
Right.
Like these stories that you're sharing about, you get down the line, you're investing time, energy, money, only for the credit committee to tell you at the end of why didn't we know that at the beginning?
Yeah.
But for you, I guess those two examples ended up working out anyway. They found a way around it.
We found a way around it. It's anyway. It's like I said, you get up every day. The research foundation being involved in the Harry Research Park from the beginning was amazing. I was there the other day, and they're doing some great things. They built some buildings out there, and that could be a real asset for UNLV. There's still opportunities everywhere, and it happens.
So ending question, it's a good segue from your last couple comments. When you think about
you don't wait for failure, by the way.
Say more about that.
What's that?
You said you don't wait for failure?
You don't wait for failure. You got to create success. You can't wait for failure. You can't blame things on somebody else or whatever it is. You gotta create you have opportunities. You got to make the best of them. You can't sit and wait. I'm working on this and that doesn't work, and I'm working. It's you got to take responsibility, and you only have yourself to blame, and if things don't work out, I mean, it's easy to look for the blame, right? Mm-hmm. Point the finger, and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen that way all the time, but you just have to move forward in your life.
So take responsibility and
it's a
create
good
success.
It's a good thing for your kids to see. You're out there, you're working, you're doing things, you're networking, you're talking to people. You take time for your kids. Your kids see everything and they hear everything. So don't think that you can have a conversation with your wife in the front seat and they don't know what's going on in the back seat. That's my biggest takeaway. Mm-hmm. Your kids hear everything. So, if you want to set, you want your kids, if you want to try and set them on a good path, there's no guarantees in life. You gotta, it's part of what you do every day.
You have to model that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. When you think about Las Vegas over the next 20 years, what are you hopeful about?
I was hopeful in the next 20 years we'd be where we are today. I think what's going on today is fantastic. I think that we're doing some amazing things with water, because I think we got water issues. I think every time we do these conservation programs, we create a bigger resource of water as far as the future is concerned, that's allowing a lot of these opportunities to take place. Because, it's, if we had not gone in this water, not reclamation, or I guess that's the right word, 20 years ago, we'd have all kinds of crises today. That doesn't mean we've solved our water problems, but we got to continue to be diligent, because Vegas can only get better. And I think we need to be, prioritize what kind of community we want this to continue to grow to be. I don't think we need growth for growth's sake. And I've always said that even in NDA. You don't want growth for growth's sake. You want growth that's going to add value to this community, that's going to continue to make the community better. And I use that word over and over because it just applies to everything. If it doesn't add value, don't do it. What's the point? what are we doing for the university? What are we doing for this? It's, there's, everybody's got their own agenda, but we'll have an NBA team here. We'll have the A's here. We can't even imagine what opportunities are down the road, because 10 years ago, you would have said I was crazy if I said this was good. This was going to happen the next 10
That's
years.
true.
So you gotta just be prepared to respond anyway, and think big, and just be prepared and continue to build a great infrastructure in this town that can accommodate it. And like I said, it's not always about just growth. It's about adding value to the community. It's about Tikkun Olam, which probably 99% don't know what that means. But you're here for a certain period of time. Where do you want your kids to grow up? Where do you want your kids to be in 20 years? And where do you want those grandkids to be? And what do you want this community to look like? And what should we be doing so that off into the future, that they don't have to scramble to some other city because nobody was, thinking about the future.
Well, you've thought a lot about the future and helped to create our current future. So, Mark, thank you for that. And thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. This was fun. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you about your takeaways from this episode. Make sure to leave us a comment or leave us a review. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can hear future episodes as they come out. My name is Chaim Mizrahi. Tune in next time.